It was just another Tuesday evening, or so I thought. The kids were running around, causing their usual chaos while I tried to finish dinner. The air in the house felt thick, but I couldn't place why. My mind kept drifting back to Jessica, sitting in the living room. She was half watching TV, but there was something off about the way she was holding her phone. Normally, she'd be fully engaged with whatever was on the screen, but tonight, her eyes kept flicking down at the device in her hands, smiling, this small, soft smile. It wasn't the kind of smile she'd give me when we were joking or sharing a quiet moment. No, this was different. It was the kind of smile that reminded me of when we first started dating. That smile, the one that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. But this time she wasn't smiling at me. She was smiling at her phone. A pit opened in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was overthinking things. She had been stressed lately, the kids had been loud, and everything felt off kilter. But the smile lingered in my mind, like a nagging whisper I couldn't ignore. Why did it feel like I was watching a scene unfold that I wasn't supposed to see? As I set the table, I glanced at her again through the window. There it was, the same smile directed at her phone. It was enough to freeze me in place. Something told me this wasn't just a simple moment, a fleeting feeling. I couldn't shake the sense that something bigger was going on. And that thought, though small, though subtle, suddenly felt like the first crack in a wall that I wasn't even sure was there. I tried to push the feeling aside as we sat down for dinner. Everything looked normal. Jessica cutting her food, the kids talking over each other, the hum of the TV in the background. It should have felt like any other evening. But it didn't. The silence between Jessica and me was heavier than usual, even though we weren't arguing. It was the kind of quiet where you could hear the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air, like something was being held back but neither of us wanted to admit it. I kept glancing at her, noticing how little she was eating, her eyes focused more on her phone than on the meal. I told myself it was just stress, that she was just tired. Maybe it was nothing. But deep down, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in my gut that told me something was wrong. It wasn't just the silence, it was the way she seemed so far away, so disconnected, like I wasn't even there. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. After all, we'd been through rough patches before. But this felt different. The more I tried to dismiss it, the stronger the feeling became. Something was slipping through my fingers and I couldn't stop it. The evening dragged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica was slipping further away with each passing minute. She was barely eating, and her eyes kept darting back to her phone, completely absorbed in whatever was happening on the screen. Every time I tried to make conversation, her responses were distant, like she was listening but not really hearing me. I watched her for a moment, my mind racing. The smile from earlier, was it just a fleeting moment, or had I missed something bigger? Something inside me urged me to ask, to dig deeper, but I hesitated. What if I was just paranoid? What if I was imagining things? But the silence was unbearable. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked her point blank, "Is everything okay?" My voice was steady, but my stomach churned as I waited for her answer. She didn't look up from her phone at first. When she finally did, there was a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "I'm just tired," she muttered, brushing off my question like it was nothing. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the way she said it, the way she seemed almost irritated that I'd even ask, it didn't sit right with me. Something was off, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, I could feel it getting worse. There was more to this, I just didn't know how deep it went. When she finally put her phone down and looked at me, really looked at me, I felt a chill run through me. Her eyes weren't the eyes of the woman I thought I knew. There was something in them, a depth of regret, maybe, or just resignation. It hit me like a wave, and for a moment I couldn't speak. That's when she said it. "I'm not happy," she admitted softly. "The spark's gone. We're just going through the motions." I froze. My mind scrambled for something to say, anything to make sense of what she was telling me, but I couldn't find the words. It was like the ground beneath me had shifted. All the little signs I had ignored, all the little doubts that had been lingering, suddenly slammed into focus. This wasn't just a phase. This wasn't something we could fix with a conversation or a vacation. She was done. She still loved me, she said, but she wasn't sure if she was in love with me anymore. The weight of her words crashed over me and I felt like I was drowning in them. I had always thought we could get through anything. But hearing her say that, hearing her admit that the connection we'd shared for so long was gone, it was like my whole world had just cracked open. And deep down I knew. She was already checked out. The spark, the love, it was all fading and I was standing there trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through my fingers. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Jessica had said. Her words echoed in my mind, but there was something else gnawing at me, something I couldn't shake. I kept thinking about that smile she gave her phone, the way she'd been acting so distant. Something didn't add up. When she left her phone on the counter the next evening, I knew I shouldn't do it. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy, but my hands were shaking with a mix of fear and desperation. I had to know. I had to see if my gut was right. I picked up her phone, unlocked it with ease, she hadn't changed the passcode, and started scrolling through her messages. I felt like a stranger digging through her private conversations, but I couldn't stop. I had to understand what was going on. Then I saw it. A thread of messages between her and a man named Adam. At first, it seemed innocent enough. A few texts about work or daily life, but then I kept scrolling. The further I went, the more I felt my stomach drop. These weren't just casual exchanges. They were flirty. They were intimate. Words like, "I miss you," "can't wait to see you," and plans to meet up filled the screen. They even talked about a future together, something I should have been a part of. It wasn't just physical. This was emotional infidelity, a deep connection, something that wasn't just about the fleeting excitement of an affair. She had fallen for him. I couldn't breathe as I read through their messages, each one stabbing me in the chest. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This was real. My wife had been emotionally unfaithful for months. I sat there paralyzed, my hands trembling. My entire world felt like it was collapsing around me. How could I have missed this? How could I not see the signs? The woman I thought I knew, my wife, had been building a life with someone else behind my back, and I was just now uncovering the truth. I felt a fire of anger rising in me, sharp and hot, but it was tangled with something else, something deeper. Hurt, devastation, betrayal. I couldn't stop shaking as I read those messages over and over, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I had built my life with, had been pouring her heart into someone else. And I had no idea. But even in the rush of emotions flooding through me, I knew I couldn't react impulsively. I couldn't confront her just yet. Not like this. If I did, it would only make everything worse. I had to think. I had to be smart. I sat there for what felt like hours, trying to steady my breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. The kids were upstairs, blissfully unaware of the chaos tearing through my mind. They needed me to stay composed. I couldn't let my anger spill over. Not now. I realized I had to gather more information. I needed to protect myself, and my kids. I couldn't just walk into this blind. I had to figure out what I was dealing with, what my options were, and how to move forward. I didn't know what was next, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't something I could fix. This was bigger than me. The hurt was suffocating, but I pushed it down, focusing instead on what came next. I had to plan. I couldn't let her see me fall apart. Not yet. Not until I had the answers and the strength to stand up for myself and my family. The nights blurred together, each one longer than the last. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind raced, replaying everything, her words, the messages, the lies. But I forced myself to push through it. I couldn't afford to fall apart. I had to be methodical. I spent hours online, reading forums, talking to people who had gone through the same thing. I was searching for some kind of manual, something that would tell me how to handle this. I couldn't go in blind. I needed advice, legal counsel, any kind of strategy that would help me protect myself and my kids. The weight of it all was crushing. I kept thinking about how my life was about to change, how everything I thought was solid was now crumbling. But amidst the panic, one thought kept me grounded. I had to protect my kids. They couldn't be part of this mess. I couldn't control what Jessica had done, but I could control how I responded. I wasn't going to let her actions destroy our lives, not without a fight. So I kept preparing. Each decision, each step felt heavier than the last, but I knew I had no choice. My world was shifting beneath my feet, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. For the sake of my kids, for the sake of my future. That Saturday morning I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of everything, the secrecy, the lies, it had all built up until I could barely breathe. I had to confront her. I had to know if there was any hope left or if it was already too late. I asked her to step into the kitchen, away from the kids. My voice was steady, more controlled than I thought it would be. "Are you having an affair?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment she didn't say anything. Her face went pale and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out what I knew. When she finally spoke, her answer was cold, almost rehearsed. "Yes," she whispered. 6 months. 6 months. A full half year of betrayal. 6 months of lies, of sneaking around behind my back. I felt my chest tighten, my stomach twist into knots. Her admission hit me like a punch. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, she was standing there, admitting to emotionally checking out for months. There was no remorse in her voice, no regret. Just an indifference that shook me to my core. The contrast between how we used to be, the connection we once shared, and this stranger in front of me was jarring. I wanted to scream, to throw all of it in her face, but I couldn't. I had to keep it together. For the kids. For me. Instead, I set boundaries. I laid out what I needed to even think about saving our marriage. Cut off all contact with Adam, go to couples therapy, respect my boundaries. But even as I said it, I knew. I knew it might be too late. She wasn't fighting for us anymore. She wasn't fighting for me. She had already moved on, and I was just holding on to something that was already slipping through my fingers. By the time I made the decision to file for divorce, I was exhausted, emotionally, physically, mentally. But something had shifted inside me. I was no longer willing to let her manipulate me, no longer willing to be the one left holding on to a marriage that had already crumbled. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my kids, about protecting them from this toxic situation. The divorce papers were ready, and as I handed them to her, I felt a strange sense of finality. She looked at them like they were a shock, her eyes wide with disbelief, but I wasn't surprised. I had been preparing for this moment, even though I hadn't wanted it to come. She had taken everything from me, the trust, the connection, and now it was time for me to take back control of my life. The pain still lingered, but it was different now. It wasn't as raw. I wasn't numb, but I had gained a clarity that I didn't have before. The anger, the sadness, they were still there, but I wasn't going to let them dictate my future. I had to focus on moving forward for my kids, for myself. I wasn't going to let this break me. I was already planning for a life without her, a life where I could rebuild, where I could be the father my kids needed and deserve. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was done. I was done being manipulated. I was done pretending. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but it was also the one that gave me the strength to move on. The ending of our marriage wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of something new, a life where I finally took control of my own happiness. I had to do something that would make it clear to Jessica, to Adam, and most importantly, to myself, that I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. The birthday party was the perfect moment, a final chance to show them both that I wasn't going to sit quietly while they continued to destroy everything we'd built. I dropped off our daughter's gift, something special she'd been asking for all year, and left without causing a scene. But there was one thing left to do. I had prepared a letter for Jessica, one that was meant for her to read aloud before the cake was cut. In that letter, I wrote about how much I loved our daughter, how proud I was of her, and how much I wished I could be there to celebrate with her. But then I added a line, one that would hit home for Jessica, for Adam, for anyone who read it. Sometimes when people make bad choices, they lose the chance to share in special moments. I ended it by reassuring our daughter that no matter what, I would always be there for her and her brother. I didn't need to be there to know how it would land. I knew Jessica and Adam would be shaken. I had to show them that I wasn't just walking away in defeat. I was reclaiming my dignity, standing up for my kids, and drawing a line they could never cross again. Later that night, when the kids came back to my parents' house, I asked them about the party. They said it was fun, but they didn't mention Adam. That was when I knew my plan had worked. They didn't need to say anything more. I had made my point. The marriage was over. There was no turning back. But in that moment, I realized something. I hadn't lost. I'd taken control of my own life, and I was ready to move forward. There would be challenges ahead, and the road would be long, but I knew one thing for certain. I was going to rebuild. For me. For my kids. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning.